Okay, we are live. So, welcome back, episode 4 of the Business of E-commerce. Today, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about parcel shipping. And today's guest is Timur. He has about 20 years of experience in logistics. He has worked at ShippingEasy and a lot of other places where he's learned a lot about the logistics industry in the e-commerce retail context. And currently, he's the president and founder and president of Logistics Remix. He works with several retailers, 3PLs, and focuses a lot on parcel shipping and helps them save money and also improve delivery performance. So, Timur, here's how I was thinking of like kickstarting our discussion today. The audience primarily for this is for our show is US based retailers, US-based e-commerce retailers, right? So if you think about like someone launching an e-commerce store, they go through the entire journey, starting from like day one, where they get the first order, which is a huge milestone, and that's probably when they start thinking about, okay, how do I actually ship this order? They're probably just going to walk to the post office or to the UPS store and then drop off the package. And from there, there is this, as their business continues to grow and the order volume increases. So maybe instead of like one order per day, now they have hit 10 orders a day, and then they have hit 100 orders a day, and they have hit 1,000 orders a day. The type of questions in their head about parcel shipping drastically changes. So maybe let's just walk through that journey. Like if you're just getting started and if you only are having let's say like one order per day, how should they think about shipping? Do they just go with UPS, USPS, FedEx? What are your thoughts around it? And then let's just walk through all of those 4 orders of magnitude after that.
Sure. Hey, well, thanks for having me on the show. Excited for this conversation and talk to your audience about parcel shipping. By the way, got to give you a shout out for your merch. You posted it
Awesome,
was a
thank
few
you.
months back. You posted
Yeah,
that the first 20 people or something like that comment on your LinkedIn post will get it was like an easy breezy t-shirt from Ordoro. So I still
nice.
have it. I still wear it. It's awesome. It's super comfy. Like great merch. So good work on
Awesome.
that.
Yeah, I know you've
Over.
been a fan for a while. Thank you. And we have some new merchandise that I need to post about. It's coming up. So I'll definitely post about it in the next couple
All
of
right. Well,
weeks.
will you just give me a heads up so I can be one of the first to comment, please?
Nice.
No, I
Awesome.
think it's a great topic. I think it's a very timely topic, especially as we turn the year. We're seeing, rate increases come into play. We're seeing lots of changes. We'll get into some of the, potential topics we discussed. We wanted to talk about with USPS, what's happening at UPS, FedEx, and regional carriers, etc. But yeah, I mean, in general, anyone that's starting out, you're right. I mean, that's the first thing. The first dream is to get your first order, and once you get that first order, you got to get it to the customer, and the way to do that is to find a way to ship it, and that's pretty typical, right? You get those first few orders, and you start shipping with the post office. In fact, I think Ordoro kind of enables that too, right?
Mhm.
Someone that's starting out, that's also growing, but starting out, enabling to print shipping labels from home. We went 20 years ago. You kind of had to go as a forcing function to walk into the post office, write down who you're shipping to, and put it on the label and pay for the shipping, and they delivered it for you. Today, a lot of that postage can be purchased online, which is makes things a lot more convenient. So typically, the first place, anyone that's starting out and looking to start shipping doesn't, of course, any startup, anyone that's kind of getting into the business is not looking to spend a ton of money, right? And
Mhm.
so they're looking for the most cost-effective way to get their orders to their customers. They'll start very simply, and you're right. I mean, the USPS is an easy way to go. You don't have to have lots of shipments. You don't have to be a big customer to get really good rates,
Mhm.
really low rates on, like a ground service.
Yeah.
But as you grow, things change, right? So you start thinking about shipping costs probably after human resources, right? Is probably your number two, maybe number two or three largest line item
Mhm.
that you're looking at in terms of cost, in terms of your P&L. So as you grow, you get from 1 to 100 orders a day. Your business starts to accumulate those expenses, and every penny spent on shipping hits your bottom line. Any penny
Yeah.
spent saved on shipping saves your bottom line. So typically, you will see businesses start kind of dissecting. And kind of the common way to think about this is typically you have e-commerce retailers that have orders that of items that weigh less than a pound and items that weigh more than a pound, or a pound or more. And so they'll typically split those up as like the most common kind of thing to do is, as I start thinking about how to save money on shipping, I start looking at my items that are under a pound and, leveraging like a USPS ground advantage solution, for example, where I can get ounce-based pricing, and then a pound plus, continuing either with USPS or maybe even shifting it over to a UPS or a FedEx rate card. I may go out to try to get a rate card, or I may leverage the Ordoro platform and the partnership that Ordoro or any other of the platforms that they're using to process the orders may have with UPS. In fact, UPS and FedEx have programs where they offer discounts to SMBs, and
they have the DAP program and the platform.
UPS calls it DAP, direct the DAP program. FedEx has their own program, and and the USPS has their own, and so through these platforms, these small businesses, typically for lightweight items, for ground shipping, can get really good rates, right? So they don't have to be really big business to get good rates.
So as your order volume grows, right? Let's say you're getting 10 orders a day. So is the weight-based segmentation the first thing to do? Like you look at below 1 pound and then above 1 pound. I guess the other things I was thinking of was you can obviously, depending on your did you offer like 2-day shipping, or did you offer like free shipping, right? I guess that's another way to segment it. And then there are more advanced things like based on zones and dimensional weight and all of that. That's probably more like much higher, more complicated for more advanced users. So it seems like the right starting point, once you start crossing around 10 orders a day, is like, okay, you need to start separating some volume out, right? Maybe USPS is ideal for some volume and UPS is ideal. And I like the way you said it. I think pretty soon shipping becomes one of the largest line items. And the very early days, you don't realize it, but over time you have to optimize it. So is it fair to say that splitting it across USPS and UPS, and where does FedEx come into picture? I know that FedEx, and I definitely want to talk to you about the UPS earnings call from last week. It looks like FedEx has been focusing on higher quality shipments, which basically means a certain segment, and UPS has been focusing on the larger volume. It looks like that's shifting, but it looks like USPS and UPS are still the two go-to for smaller shippers. Is that right?
So I think that's the kind of the current view, and part of why that's the current view is you've got the UPS, you mentioned the DAP program. So that's their discount program for SMBs. That is where they can, when the SMBs, the e-commerce retailers that are starting out or smaller size, can print and buy shipping labels with UPS at a deep discount, something they couldn't just walk into the UPS store and get, right? And that's available through platforms. So it could be a shopping platform, it could be someone like an Ordoro. FedEx, I think, is a little bit behind in terms of kind of rolling out that program. I think they're trying to play a little bit of catch up. If I kind of geek out on this stuff, so I'll listen to earnings calls and follow UPS and FedEx and what they're doing. And you follow UPS, and almost every earnings call in the last couple of years, the CEO has brought up their DAP program and how they're gaining volume and revenue through that program, because and one of the metrics that they report on is what % of their business comes from SMB. So I think they're really pushing it, and they've got it into a lot of different platforms. But I think FedEx is just is not far behind. They are trailing, but they're going to be catching up. They're interested in the SMB segment as well, and then the under 1 pound, over 1 pound. I kind of like the most common sense, like, hey, let's look at this. Like the only really one of the only ways to get low cost rates for under 1 pound packages, which is a big chunk of e-commerce, is to go with the USPS. They typically will have the lowest rates for under 1 pound. Now, other carriers offer that as well. There are a handful. There are some carriers that are coming into the space that are trying to launch new solutions for under 1 pound. We'll get into all of that. But for the smaller retailer, 10 to 100 orders a day, USPS is going to be their main option. As they kind of progress, they get over 100 orders a day, starting to approach 1,000 or 500,000 orders a day. There's going to be a lot of things that come into play, right? Of course, as you mentioned, the delivery promise. If a customer is buying a 2-day delivery, they're paying more money, so you're typically going to use the 2-day, a service that can get the product there in 2 days, and that's going to be with UPS and FedEx. Or you're going to use a product if customers is paying for standard ground shipping and they expect the order in 2 to 5 days. Then all of those carriers, right, can typically deliver in 2 to 5 days.
So before we get into that, right? So just going back, I think one of the takeaways it sounds like is that even if you're low volume, you should don't walk into the post office and purchase the postage, or don't go to the UPS store. Instead, buy it online. It can be through an online platform. It doesn't have to be Ordoro. There are a lot of platforms that offer it. It looks like there are these special rates. I think USPS calls it CEC rates, which are commercial rates, which you can get through platforms like us or anyone else. And then UPS calls it DAP, or digital access program. It's like discounted rates, which you can get through platforms like Ordoro. So it's a no-brainer for you to use any platform to print those labels instead of going to the store, right?
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, the rates are
really good.
The rates are really good. I run analysis. I look at help customers save money on parcel shipping, and then whenever I even look at a customer that's shipping 100 or 2 or 300 orders a day, a lot of times these rates are actually more competitive than what someone can go and get directly, negotiate themselves with the carrier directly. It's a growing program, and it's definitely what I would recommend. I think you would recommend for smaller shippers getting started instead of going through the hassle of creating their own account.
Yeah, that's exactly the pattern that I see too. Right now, talking about the next band, that's where I think a lot of your work becomes very interesting. They have big enough volume, and then now they need to start optimizing further, right? So maybe they can go and negotiate a rate card from a UPS or even USPS. I think USPS has started to offer rate cards to some of the higher volume shippers. What are the things to look for here? How do you optimize? I think there are a lot of questions. So I think you spend a lot of time thinking about working with those type of customers. So what are the big takeaways? What are the patterns that you're seeing with those customers?
Yeah, I think the big thing right now is once shipping starts to grow, they know it's a big hit on the bottom line, and it becomes a big cost line item. Then you've got the GRIs, and more recently we saw UPS, FedEx come out with this year 5.9% increase in January.
Yeah.
That's just on the base rates.
That's been going on, right? Pretty much every year they increase
every
like
year
5
it's
to
been
6%.
4.9, 6.9, 5.9, but it's averaging about 5.9. So it's a pretty sizable increase compared to, like, if you look at the 5-year prior to the last 5-year period prior to COVID period. And so one of the things that everyone's thinking about is how do I get better rates, or I think I'm now big enough to get better rates. And what happens is they kind of know, they have an idea that they can get better rates, but they don't know how much better. And a lot of that comes down to just not knowing. They don't know what other people are paying. They don't know what programs UPS and FedEx have, what kind of discounts they could offer. Hey, if I ship 500 orders a day or 200 orders a day, or if my volume looks like this, or if I do 30% next day air and 70% ground, what kind of discount am I eligible for? And that comes down to kind of looking at benchmarks and really understanding the data. And so, a lot of times, you can try to go it alone, negotiate the rates, you do the best, and a lot of people will go in and they'll try to do the best that they can. But not knowing what they're leaving on the table, it becomes a challenge. And so trying to understand what is the possibility, how much could I possibly save if I take my business to the market, if I'm running an RFP, if I'm going to go switch from one carrier to another, what could I possibly get? What should I be asking for? I think is where a lot of people miss the mark. And so, the only way really to know what they can possibly get is to understand what the benchmarks look like. Because it's all in the data, right? I mean, we all come back to, I think everyone runs their business based on and makes decisions that are data driven. And so without understanding your data, okay, well, there's 100 other e-commerce retailers that look like me, and here's the average or the best rates that they're getting or the best possible discounts. Here's what I should be asking for.
Yeah.
It's kind of impossible. I'll give you an example. Like if I'm going to go buy a car, right? I'm going to go online. I'm not just going to go to one dealer. I'm going to go ask, 3 dealers. I might go to different websites, try to see what the pricing trends look like. Maybe I'll go to some forums and try to read what other people are paying. And so collecting all that information, collecting all that data is, I think, really important in order to be able to start, looking at better rates for comparable service, either with a competitive carrier. So if you're switching from one to another, or going back to your incumbent and saying, hey, we've now grown. We went from 10 to 500 orders a day. We deserve something better. Here's what we're asking for. What can you do? And then knowing if you're going to get a good rate.
Okay, so in that example, right, or in this situation, it is a very complex. It's a very complex problem you're trying to solve. It's not like a standard rate card. When you're particularly negotiating with UPS or USPS, I don't know the intricacies of how that works. But if you go into a carrier, you better be like fully educated about your needs and what are all the options out there. So that's where like a service like what you offer and comes in, right? Where you can actually work with this shipper, and you understand, you've done this across like several different retailers and 3PLs, so you know exactly what to look for, what are the right questions to ask, and you kind of help these shippers have that negotiation done, and help them even like set an expectation of like what a good rate card should look like, right?
Yeah, and one thing is the rate card. I mean, but as you know, these rates get really complex. If you go pull up the daily rates for UPS, it's like 100. I don't know how many pages, but I'm just gonna throwing out a pretty egregious number, like 100-page document with lots of accessorials, and these are like additional surcharges, like fuel and large package surcharge, and additional handling and residential delivery and remote areas. And so you've got, probably if we were going to sit down and kind of put together a list of how many items could be negotiated with a carrier, it'd probably be like 25 plus, right, of different items and terms and conditions and rates. And so, and you may know something about like one of the details, but there is a ton that goes into, getting the all-in cost and getting the all-in spend reduced. So that's really important to have someone by your side, or actually, just really through experience, kind of diving in and understanding kind of how your business is impacting. And that's why I go back to the data, right? Really having good data on your shipments is important, because at the end of the day, if you can pull a report that shows you how much you're spending, what are you spending on accessorials, are you getting hit with additional charges you weren't planning for? Right. All these things is important, because actually part of the negotiation, you might be negotiating an item or trying to get a lower price on something on the contract that's not actually doesn't have as big of an impact as item 2. And so it's important to really understand the characteristics of your shipments and what you've been invoiced, and really kind of be able to pull that together to see what's possible, what's not.
Okay.
But
yeah, that makes
the 5, as you're growing, as you're negotiating, and of course, would love to dive in deeper as you kind of start even growing even more.
Yeah, and all of that makes perfect sense, Aaron. Like in any negotiation, you need to really understand what your needs are, and then understand what all the comparables. So all of that makes perfect sense to work with an expert rather than going it alone. Now, what do you see typically when someone gets a rate card like this? What's the pattern that you're seeing? Are they always committing all their volume to just one carrier, or do they tend to spread across?
Yeah.
And I guess another aspect of this is it's not just the rates that you need to look for, right? You also need to look for like quality of service, because different carriers have like different quality of service. So what are the higher level patterns that you see when you work with these larger shippers?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot more than just the rate, right? A lot of times you get what you pay for. You probably heard that expression. And so sometimes you may have someone coming to you with a rate so good, you may want to make a switch, but then their on-time delivery performance, which is a major metric, right? A key metric that everyone measures. Here's when I promised it to the customer, but I'm either delivering it on time or I'm not making that promise. And it's really simple, right? It's, hey, I have 100 orders a day. Only 80 of them are delivered on the date that I told the customer and the date that the carrier promised it. I'm delivering 80%, versus I have 100 orders a day and 98 of them are delivering on time. That's 98% on time. And so that's really important to look at, as well as, is the order getting there in the right shape, right? You know, you've got potential damage that could happen, right? And so some carriers may not take as good care of it through their delivery network. And so shippers are always looking at, what's my damage claim ratio, right? Like, out of the 100 orders, maybe they delivered on time, but how many of them delivered damaged? Or how many of them, the ones that didn't deliver were lost? And so there's a lot more than just cost, as you said, that's really important to look at. But as you get bigger, and I think this is probably where you were leading to, is understanding that you don't have to go with just one single solution, one single provider. I think those days are over. Those were the days, if you're talking about 5, 10, 15 years ago, typically it was, hey, I'm going to use this one carrier. I'm going to just put all my spend with this carrier, and they're the ones that I'm going to have a relationship with. These days, there's a lot of options. There's a lot of delivery providers. In fact, there's multiple national carriers, as we've mentioned, and there's also regional carriers and alternative carriers that I would say provide really strong rates, really strong service. They may not touch every single zip code in the United States, but they may be able to take anywhere from 10 to 50% of the volume that you have, and provide service for just those orders. And so a lot of shippers, especially after COVID hit, and demand for e-commerce delivery went up, the national carriers couldn't handle it all. You know the story, right? They were pushing back on the volume, and the shippers had to go find alternatives. So they had to go bring in alternative carriers. And so that kind of opened the door to this evolution in shipping, where now you see retailers using multiple carriers, and especially if where the regional carrier strategy can come in and add a lot of value, is if the retailer is now shipping from more than one location. So if they're using, if you have multiple locations throughout the United States, well, now the regional carriers can offer even more coverage, and we can dive in. It's a pretty big world with the regional carriers. But we can dive in, even.
Yeah, that gets really interesting. Based on like the ship from ship to combination, maybe there's a regional carrier that can give you a much better rate and a quality of service. So it looks like the where this is all heading is, as your volume grows, rather than betting it all on one carrier, you should like spread that across different carriers, and then do rate shopping. And it could be like rules saying that, okay, for certain zip code combinations and weights, this is the carrier, right? It gets complex, but I think there is tech out there that can do this. I know, like for example, in Ordoro, we do have like the whole multi-carrier rate shopping approach, where we can display pretty much, and we can have rules to show you which carrier is the best across for any given package. So, and it also looks like, I guess the other thing about these negotiated rates, the way it used to happen is that you have to make volume commitment, and if you don't make this volume commitment, next year when the contract renews, they'll give you a different rate, right? So it's always better to have, typically in any negotiation, have multiple vendors and leave a little bit of business open with everyone, so that you can easily move from one to another without, and that kind of keeps the power in your hands, rather than like 100% betting.
Totally. Once you put all your eggs in one basket, right? It creates risk, right? You create risk for yourself, for your company. And so having multiple carriers that are part of the carrier network, and that's what I've seen. That's been the popular trend over the last 5 years. Ever since COVID. It gives you more control. You can shift volume, not only due to rate, right? Not only on rates, but we talked about damage claims, and we talked about if a carrier is not performing in terms of on-time delivery. Gives a lot more flexibility and a lot more opportunity to kind of fine-tune the network on an ongoing basis, so that as the orders drop and your orders are going to the carrier, like you said, based on the certain business rules that you can tweak from time to time, are going to be routed with the right carrier, that's offering the right service.
Okay, cool. Awesome. I think I mean, the time just flew by. We are like 25 minutes into this. I think there's a lot more we need to cover. So I think we should definitely do another episode. Maybe we should talk about the split between UPS and USPS, which happened like a few weeks ago. That completely changed the dynamics for a
Mhm.
lot of like
Mhm.
e-commerce retailers who are relying on SurePost. I know there's like Amazon shipping is probably going to be a big player, and I know that UPS is trying to separate from Amazon. I think last week's earnings call they announced that, so we need to cover that. Regional carriers, there's a lot of regional carriers that are coming up. Like you said, I think they got a boost during COVID time. So I think there's like tons and tons of stuff you and I can talk about. So, but today we'll stop this discussion for today, and then maybe let's just like see on LinkedIn what are the other topics that people want to hear about, and then we can schedule another one. So thanks a
Yeah.
lot. Yeah.
No, of course. Of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. Let's do it again. I think there's a lot going on, like you said. And like every week, I feel like there's so much news dropping,
Yeah.
and that we could do this like weekly.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Timur.
All
Talk to you
right.
later. Bye.